summit, Health Policy Research Summit. And I just want to start with, let's see if I can see here. Okay. Okay, yes, thank you. If we could take a moment just to think about the beautiful faces that all of us see here. This is health equity, and we think about a world where health equity exists for many individuals, families, and communities, yet we know that that is not the case for many of us, particularly populations that are underserved, at risk, and vulnerable. And so we're always constantly striving for health equity, and that's giving people what they need, when they need it, and in the amount that they need it. And that is part of what we are trying to accomplish, that we are accomplishing within the TCC, which aligns seamlessly with the vision of Morehouse School of Medicine, which is leading the creation and advancement of health equity. We're dedicated to excellence and relative to science, education, community-based programs, ways in which we engage with community members such that we truly listen to what their needs may be and try to respond to those needs in an effective manner. I recall about 6 years ago when we first considered applying for the TCC, and it was a very interesting opportunity, and we looked at supporting or being partners with another institution, another university. And Dr. Valerie Montgomery Rice, who is our president and dean of Morehouse School of Medicine, at the time she was the dean of Morehouse School of Medicine, she said, no, absolutely not. You need to actually lead and be the ones who are submitting an application from Morehouse School of Medicine. We have the strong team here that can do it, and so we looked around and collaborated with several different departments, centers, and institutes here at Morehouse School of Medicine, including the National Center for Primary Care, the Prevention Research Center, the Clinical Research Center, and others. And we recognized that we really can pull together a strong application. Of course, this was guided by many dictations of Dr. Satcher's, and listening to his conceptualization of health equity, addressing health disparities in ways that we can work collaboratively, and being able to model ethical leadership through integrity. And so many individuals, whether it be community members, scholars, community-based individuals who are representing community-based organizations, faculty, staff, students, etc. We have been empowered by you to truly lead the creation and advancement of health equity. Thank you so much, Dr. Satcher. Welcome. And so when we turn to looking more closely at the Transdisciplinary Collaborative Center for Health Disparities Research, again, the TCC, I am delighted that we have been funded by the National Institute of Health, National Institute of Minority Health and Health Disparities, and Dr. Hopkins is our project director, Dr. Ophelia is the co-principal investigator, along with me as the principal investigator. And I think about the ways in which Region 4, which is our focus area, our primary catchment area that we are looking at, and it's, as many of you can imagine, has so many different disparities relative to any number of different mental, behavioral health, and overall health disorders. It's known as the stroke belt, the belt that's concerning diabetes, the cancer belt. I mean, the list goes on and on. I'm a Southern girl from Virginia, and for me, I had to, I certainly enjoyed many of the cultural tenets of being from the South. Some of you enjoyed our Southern style breakfast this morning. But I realized that I had to change some things with myself, my lifestyle, relative to my diet, exercising a little bit more, because my life simply depended on it. It wasn't a question of, should I do this, X, Y, and Z? I had to. Otherwise, I would be in the population or community that is deleterious with any number of different disorders that we've spoken about. And so I shift now to the TCC, and we are very pleased in the work that we're being able to do, and such that we are interested, willing, and able to engage with communities such that we're addressing some of the health disparities that exist. We are advancing health equity, truly. And one of the goals of the TCC is to develop, evaluate, implement, and advance science, and to use that science such that we can have certain discoveries and to reduce disparities in health. And so our first project, Subproject 1, is focused on helping parents, many of which are our first teachers, and we have to learn from our parents. So if we can empower them to be in a position to know and understand how to address social and emotional health for our children, that is great. And so Subproject 1 focuses on that. And currently, we are in 13 states across the United States, which I'm very proud of. Subproject 2, Project Thrive, is focused on the development and implementation of a culturally centered integrated care model that addresses co-occurring depression and selected chronic diseases. Diabetes and cardiovascular diseases are what we have chosen. And so we partner with Grady Health Systems, and we're currently engaged in and working with several community-based health clinics in order to actualize this research project. Subproject 3 is using health information technology to eliminate health disparities. It's led by Dr. Dominique Mack, who oversees our National Center for Primary Care here at Morehouse School of Medicine. Subproject 3B is using innovative ways or strategies or approaches to support patients from a holistic, comprehensive viewpoint, from a multidimensional perspective, and how we can address some of the health concerns or needs that they've identified, including diabetes. And so that's Health 360X. And Subproject 4, many of you may have heard of or maybe aware of the 1988 Institute of Medicine report, which was entitled The Future of Public Health. Within the report, it was referred to that the need for leaders is too great to leave their emergence to chance. And so our Subproject 4 is focused on how to train, develop, support leaders, health leaders in particular, postdoctoral fellows, relative understanding how policy is a thread that can be used or should be attended to throughout various aspects of the work that they do. And so Subproject 4 is one that is really an outgrowth of some of the work that's being conducted within the Stature Health Leadership Institute, our Health Policy Fellowship. We have many different professionals, young professionals that are across the country making a difference as it comes to health and health disparities in different communities. And so collectively, our work is exceptional. We are doing a great job, and we significantly add to science and discovery. In addition to the research projects that are being conducted here within Morehouse School of Medicine, we recognize and know that we needed to have a community component such that
the Division of Reproductive Health. And as many of you know, reproductive health has been one of the most controversial areas of public health. And that reminds me that I was in Arkansas the week before with Dr. Jocelyn Elders, where she received an endowed professorship. And I say that because, as you know, Dr. Elders was fired. And that's what she says. She doesn't let anybody say that she lost her job or she resigned. She announces very loudly that she was fired. Well, you know, there's something to that. Dr. Elders has 2 endowed chairs. I was at the University of Minnesota the year before speaking at an occasion when they established an endowed chair. So even though she was fired, her integrity still stands out. You know, an institution like the University of Minnesota or University of Arkansas does not establish an endowed chair in your name unless they want you to be a part of the institution forever. You know, funds that are going to produce professors and students. And I say all of that to say that there is something to be said for staying the course. There's something to be said for integrity. And I was in Tuskegee about a month ago celebrating the 20th anniversary of the presidential apology for the Tuskegee study. And one comment that came to mind that Dr. Shalala made on that day 20 years ago, she was not there, but she was giving the commencement address at University of Wisconsin. And she said, in public health, our ethics must be as sophisticated as our science. Now, nobody questions the sophistication of science in this country. We've won more Nobel Prizes in medicine than any other country. But what Tuskegee pointed out was that we had some problems with our ethics. And on that day, of course, which I remember as if it were yesterday, President Clinton pointed out that we needed not only to apologize for the Tuskegee study, we needed African Americans to accept the apology and forgive, and then to become involved in organ donations and clinical trials. And those things are true. But until we get to that point where people believe that our ethics are as sophisticated as our science, we're going to have problems. I mean, you can establish an Affordable Care Act and feel very good about the fact that more than 20 million more people now are covered. And then somebody comes along a few years later and tries to wipe out the whole Affordable Care Act. That's what we're struggling with. And until we get past that, we're going to have trouble getting the kind of representation of African Americans in clinical trials that we would like to have. Our ethics must be as sophisticated as our science. One more story, and as I get older, I tell more stories. But, and it happened at the CDC, because after I spoke, we had a panel discussion of former directors of reproductive health. And they asked me to participate on the panel. And one question they raised was, do you remember what you were doing 50 years ago? I had to think about that for a minute. But then I did remember one thing especially. Most of you have heard about Dr. Benjamin Elijah Mays, right? That was a name that was so prominent in this country, and especially in the Atlanta University Center, where he served as president of Morehouse College for 27 years. He was an amazing man. He is given credit for helping to develop Martin Luther King Jr. and several other leaders. But anyway, I heard from Cleveland, because I was halfway through my program in the MD PhD program at Case Western. I heard that Dr. Mays was retiring and that he was going to give the commencement address. So I decided I had to be here. So I came back to Atlanta 50 years ago in 1967 to help celebrate the retirement of Dr. Benjamin Elijah Mays. It was an amazing occasion, which I will never forget. But something else happened that week. For the first time in my life, I actually ate at a restaurant in downtown Atlanta and didn't get arrested. Now, when I was a student here, and I graduated in '63, the student movement rose to its highest heights. And many of us went to jail and even to prison just trying to buy food in a restaurant, if you can imagine that. That was the reality of that time. And in my senior year, when I was head of the student movement here in the AU Center, I remember going to a restaurant with a student from Spelman. We had it all planned, of course. And they told us they couldn't serve us, and we refused to leave, and the police came and they arrested us. And on the way to jail, this student, Annie Jo Weaver, said, "David, why don't we go on a hunger strike?" I was not much into hunger. I had had my share of hunger. But I said, but we did. We decided to go on a hunger strike. And during that week on the hunger strike, there was news all over the world about students in jail on a hunger strike. So Coca-Cola called a meeting of businesses in Atlanta, and they basically said, you know, if we're going to be a global leader, if we're going to be a global business, we can't have this kind of publicity. And so on that day, those business leaders decided that they were going to end segregation in Atlanta. And when business leaders make a decision, things happen, right? Nobody understood that better than Andy Young, who used that so well to do so much in the city. Well, that's longer than I had planned to talk, but I'm trying to, I'm trying to say to you, stay the course. Don't give up, don't give in. Just what they used to say, just because it's kind of hard, stay the course. Because as we used to sing, we shall overcome someday. But we've got to keep working for that. We've got to keep looking for allies. We have a lot of allies, but we got to find them, come together and work. I saw an article the other day, and I haven't been able to research it, but basically said that the mortality rate for African Americans had decreased by 25% in the last 20 years. I hope that's true, and it's pretty easy to find out. But I know now, as the opioid addiction is killing so many people, predominantly whites, it's also killing African Americans. So we have to make sure that we stay on top of these issues. Opioid addiction, suicide among people who are addicted. Those are all issues that we're all dealing with. And of course, as you know, Surgeon General Vivek Murthy was asked to resign last week. One of the things he did, of course, was to release the Surgeon General's report on opioid addiction. And so we've got to keep that going. We've got to keep working. So many black men have been incarcerated because of drugs, especially cocaine, crack cocaine back in the 70s and continuing. But opioid addiction is a more equal opportunity drug, so far more whites have suffered from it. Well, having said all of that, probably too much, Keisha, it's really important that we're here together, and that we've come together because we share a concern about health equity. We need to keep coming together, keep putting our heads together, and find a solution. I'd have to ask one question. How many people in the audience have gone through leadership development programs at the Satchel Leadership Institute? Okay, very good. I see former fellows, former members of the Community Health Leadership Program. And what about parents? So I know we've graduated quite a few parents. Oh, they're here, okay. So thank you very much. I ended my statement at the CDC the other day reflecting on Dr. Mays' favorite poem. I'll do the same here. It's called God's Minute. I have only just a minute, only 60 seconds in it, forced upon me. I can't refuse it. I didn't seek it, didn't choose it, yet it's up to me to use it. I must suffer if I lose it, give account if I abuse it. Just a tiny little minute. and yet eternity is in it. Thank you.
Thank you again, Dr. Satcher. Good morning, everyone. I am Dr. Divine Ofabe, the Associate Project Director for the TCC. Today, I am excited to introduce our first guest speaker, Mrs. Siobhan Arline Bradley. Mrs. Arline Bradley is the Director of External Engagement and a Senior Counselor in the Office of the U.S. Surgeon General. Formerly, she served in various capacities with the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, specifically as the Executive Vice President of Strategic Planning and Partnerships, Chief of Staff, Chief Program Officer, and Senior Director of Health. Mrs. Arline Bradley has over 17 years of public health experience and holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Exercise Science and a Master's of Health degree from both Tulane University in Louisiana. Recently, she earned a Master's in Divinity at the Samuel DeWitt Proctor School of Theology at Virginia Union University. She's a former ad hoc member of the National Advisory Council on Minority Health and Health Disparities for the National Institute on Minority Health and Health Disparities at the NIH. She has also served as an expert advisor panelist for the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention's Division of Nutrition, Physical Activity, and Obesity. At this time, please join me in welcoming Ms. Siobhan Arline Bradley to the stage.
Good morning. I believe, is this my mic here? I'm a hip hop girl. Microphone check, 1, 2. Is this it here? And just for the sound man, if you can give me a handheld in case this doesn't work, that would be great. I believe podiums are jail, and so I don't like to stand behind those things. Let's see if we can get this right. Can you hear me? All right, good morning. Happy rainy day. The rain is a good thing. The rain is a good thing. I am so excited to be here. Excuse me when I run out of here. I have a 3-year-old at home that has a program tonight in DC, and if I want to live to see another day, I've got to go to Kitty Academy tonight in Laurel, Maryland. So excuse me as I run out, but I am so grateful for the opportunity. Dr. Satcher, thank you for being a leader, someone that all of us in public health have looked up to. I remember the first time I saw him, I was 20 years old at my first APHA meeting, and he walked in and we just went. And he doesn't even know that probably the number of students that have followed his work. So you are an awesome, awesome example to all of us. So thank you so much, Dr. Satcher. And to the TCC staff, Jamie and friends in the audience, I see Daniel, thank you all. You have been amazing. And the conversation we had this morning, I feel so connected to all those that are going to be speaking today. But I have about 29 minutes, and I'm going to use all of them because there's a lot to talk about today. And the title of my talk is very controversial because I am a hip-hop daughter. And there's a song that we used to sing when we dance called "The Roof is on Fire." You see our heads, and we say, the roof, that's what we used to say, the roof is on fire. There's an expletive in there that said we won't let it burn. And I thought about health equity. The house is burning, and it's burning from the top. I am a Baptist preacher, I am. And one of the things that I realized between my divinity life and my public health life is that in the center of all that is the core of humanity. That's the intention. The intention of all the work that we do in public health is about saving human lives. But if the house is burning, if you're on fire, and you can't quench that fire in time, it's going to burn down. And the house is about to burn down. And so I want to talk about the role of science to fuel a revolution. Because there's a revolution that can be televised. Matter of fact, most of us are videotaping it right now. And if it wasn't for some of the cameras, we wouldn't be able to tell some of the stories that are happening in our country. And I want to take a second of silence for Jordan. who's 15 years old in a car that was driving away from the officers. And what we don't know about Jordan is now being brought to light, is that he lived in a 2-parent home with a 3.5 GPA on his way to college. Who knows, he could have gone to Morehouse. He could have played football. He could have been a doctor. He could have been a lawyer. He could have been anything. But he's dead because the house is on fire. And there is a revolution coming. The question is, to the researchers in the room, are you ready to fuel it? And that is the whole premise of my talk today. Now, it's one of my favorite memes because people talk about health equity all the time. But what in the world does that really mean? I mean, what does it mean to have health equity? And quite frankly, what is the inequity that we're trying to get away from? So just before I set the talk, let me just define it, because I am a good science girl. I promise I will follow the framework. But I want some of my money back for my MPH, and I'll tell you why. Y'all pray for me. I'm going to tell the truth today. Some of that stuff didn't work by the book. Some of it didn't work because I'm here talking to you about health equity right now in 2017, when systems were supposed to have progressed. So health equity, when all people have the opportunity to attain their full potential. I love the back part. And no one is disadvantaged from what? Achieving this potential because of their social position. And I highlight this because socially determined circumstances are our everyday lives. For those of you that are in this room that are blessed with a TAM, blessed with being disadvantaged, connected to a community that is marginalized, you are socially disadvantaged every morning. And there's some things we just can't change. And folks have tried. But you can't change the way that our country has run. You can't change the history of this country. We've tried to even erase it from books. We've tried to delete it from our memories. We tried to remove the camera and not even show it to the public when it is public knowledge. But there are social disadvantages for many people in this country. And then the inequity. The difference or disparity in a health outcome that is systematic, hence avoidable. Really doesn't have to happen, but it does because it's unjust. This is a reality for our country. So I've got 3 points. I'm Baptist, 3 points. The fire, the firemen, and the water. The fire, the firemen, and the water. And I want to talk about the fire because the fire is what fuels all this mess. How did America become America? By 3 things: by boat, water, and border. Now the question is, what was your entrance? I don't care what color you are. What is your story? And I'm just going to play some pictures, and I want you to just look at them. I wonder why that picture was first. Soak it in. It doesn't matter who you are. You've got a boat, border, and water story. And that is how America got here. By way of a trade, by way of a boat ride, or by already being here. Now, how do we get to this inequity in our country? And I call it this: deep roots in the tree of ism. That's how we got here. Ism got us here. Now, I want you to see ism. This is ism in its rarest, rawest forms. The lynching, the gender discrimination. Women, be very clear. We just started voting less than 100 years ago. the concentration camps in these United States for our Asian American brothers and sisters. And yes, Cesar Chavez, the faces of an immigration movement. This is how we got here. And I want to show you some realism. Present day-ism that we used to think was in black and white photos, but it stands in color in our face every day. And the isms are the gasoline that gets poured on the fire in the house. And let's talk about some of those isms. Now, the racism, classism. I love what Kamara always says that. Say racism. And I say it often because I want people to understand that racism is a real thing. It is not some sociologic conversation or construct out there in the world that we want to get rid of. No, it stands. But racism, classism, sexism, ageism, then I started adding some, geographyism. Is everyone in the South a racist? Really? Is everything bad in the middle of America? Are the coasts the best coasts? Do they have all the intellectuals? Geographyism, health coverageism. If you're covered or not means something in this country. About 12 o'clock, we'll find out what that means. And I added some more. Accentism. Do you have an accent? Are you from a country? How dare you not speak English? Abilityism. We have forgotten those that use devices to be mobile. We have forgotten the communities that are living with disabilities. And there is abilityism in our country. Sexual orientationism. Political partyism. And yes, religious superiorityism. My faith is better than yours. It's righter than yours. It's more important than yours. And so, I'm coming to talk to the firemen and firewomen in the house. You have the ability to start quenching the fire. And I want to talk to you about going back to the drawing board. Now, let me just give you this qualifier. And I'm in Atlanta. Dr. King's quote is used everywhere of all forms of injustice. You know, is this about healthcare being the most shocking and inhumane? I've stopped using that quote, and I'm going to tell you why. Because in 1899, Dr. Du Bois was way ahead of the game. There's a study called, in the Philadelphia Negro, a social study. And he says, one thing, of course, you must expect to find, and that is a much higher death rate at present among Negroes than among whites. Du Bois was ahead of his time. This is almost 70 years before King even talked about this. And what he was saying was that we can look at healthcare as the market for social advancement. He was the first that talked about the social determinants of health. And if you ever get a chance to get this book, it's called Body and Soul. It's about the Black Panther healthcare movement. And there's a study that they highlight from Du Bois. It's in Health and Physique. And it talks about the idea of black inferiority and how he dispelled every physiological myth that was placed in the medical community. And I'm at the Morehouse School of Medicine, and I thought about this. How do I tell the firemen and firewomen how to quench this mess? Because you stand behind some of the most important research that's going to be put out in this country. And if you do not publish, if you do not take the risk to say some of the things that need to be said, people will die. Systems will continue to oppress. If you don't do what you're supposed to do, their blood will be on your hands. And I say that to myself every day. Yes, I am in the Surgeon General's office. Yes, there was a change in administration, but it didn't stop the assignment on me to stand for the people that I serve every day. And that is your calling, ladies and gentlemen. You have the opportunity to quench this. Now, if I was in church, I'd take a text, but I'm not. I'm in school. And so we call it a framework. Good, I'm glad you got that joke because I know some churchy people in here. I'm in Atlanta. This is one framework that I stand by to this day. And there there was about 30 different theories that I saw in school, and I just wanted to throw something at every teacher that talked about them. Because when I was in the Ninth Ward of New Orleans, none of that mess worked. And Miss Johnson, who is still alive today, she told me, you think you fancy, don't you? She said, but tell me how to get this fried food healthy. That's all she wanted to know. And I wanted to tell her about Bandura's theory. And social cognitive work. What she said was, tell me how to eat. Teach me how to teach my babies to live long like me. I'm trying to give you context, ladies and gentlemen. My degrees almost got in the way of common sense. What she said was, train me so I can pass it on to my people. I'm telling you, train them so you can pass it on to your people. Prepare them so you can pass it on to your people. And this theory, you should consider. This idea of an individual being affected by their environment makes so much sense. I mean, this is the simplest, most accurate theory I've seen in this world of public health. And I've done this for a few years. And what I love about it is that we talk about, although individuals do have some sort of responsibility, and I love this because we talk about putting on your bootstraps. I get mad at that because I tell folks, you're assuming I got boots that work. Matter of fact, you're assuming that somebody wants to even allow me to have boots. And when I put them on, somebody might give me their hand-me-down boots. And if you were a southerner born in the deep south, and my parents are in their 70s now, they tell me, Siobhan, we used to get hand-me-down books with people's name in them. And when they found out they were going to the black school, they would write things in them. So don't tell them to pick up their bootstraps. Their boots were broken, but they figured out how to walk in broken boots. And you have that chance to teach someone who may not have the concept of self-responsibility, but to give them context on how they live inside of this society. And what the theory does, it says, yeah, you have responsibility, but you've got to think about how lifestyle change is affected by community norms and regulations and policy. That's why we're here. The problem is folks don't understand how policy affects their purpose. If people knew the power that they have, we're going to talk about this in a minute, oh boy, the house would stop burning. But the problem is we've forgotten that we've got power. Forceful analysis. It's not a theory, but it's a concept, and it's used very, very heavily, particularly in health, but also for pros and cons. And you see it a lot in the business world. But I want to challenge you here. And I don't know if my clicker have a pointer. Oh, look at that. Look at that right there. You see these things called restraining forces? What it says, forceful analysis looks at what drives something and what restrains something. And in your research, I challenge you in two spots. Think of business systems. Because you need to be able to tell the story of why health equity has not come to pass yet. Why are we still, I heard about the word disparity in 1999. That's when I started my public health practice work. Reached 2010 at the heart of New Orleans, in New Orleans, Louisiana. And I said disparities every day, because that's what they said to say, is disparities. And now it's equity. Now it's not sexy anymore to say disparities, so you say equity. And then in 20 years, it's going to be something else. But nothing has changed, because the system hasn't changed. And because the researchers haven't done what they're supposed to do, I'm saying it. We haven't given voice to the work that you're doing. No one knows what you're researching if you're in your desk just researching it and leaving it in the desk and leaving it published for no one else to hear or see. Shame on us with these degrees. And somebody still can't eat. Shame on us if we don't walk this walk that we walking and talking and go down and get the people that may not even look like you, but they're human like you. The research has to give voice to what is pushing at this health equity. But then I challenge you here. Driving forces are actually putting research into health equity and also cultural competency. What do I mean? I mean that if you're not telling the story of how culturally competent practice works and can work and should be funded and should be supported, then you're not giving yourself an opportunity to win. I'm a ball player and I ran track in college, so I believe in winning. So an L doesn't work. Losing is hard. We're losing right now because we're seeing systems continually go down the same path. And we're going to have another research summit in 2027. And will we still be talking about health equity? That's the question I need. Now, what's your responsibility? You need to standardize community-based models in your research, ladies and gentlemen. The word is standard. I say this very often. Grantors cannot fund what they don't know or see. They don't know anything about your work unless you start doing the work. And they can't value what they don't see because you're not valuing it. What do I mean? I mean if you don't write the grant about the hard stuff and put it before every funder there is until somebody says yes. Take the step. Develop interventions that consider all the social determinants of health. Don't get stuck in just public health worlds. It's not realistic. The whole person is connected to their circumstances. And their circumstances are all in these things here, and even more. Humanize every research experience and look at this. Use the data to empower and build the people, not just publish about the people. Don't use them and leave them. Because that's what we do. Connect research programs and policy. And I'm going to put this on the table. Civil rights advocacy. I come from the NAACP. I come from community organizing. Consider civil rights advocacy models in your research. How did it work to change the policies? How did it work to get to the Voting Rights Act, to get to the Civil Rights Act? How did that even work? And was it effective? I'm going to challenge you and say yes. That's why I got gutted, because it was effective. I'll leave that there. And to much is given, much is required. The community cannot live without you. They cannot live without you doing the work. I want you to see some folk that use their power. I take a personal connection to that picture right around in here. Some of you remember these pictures. Some of you remember these faces. Folks that know their power understand that they are worth it. I am worth everything that I've gotten. One, because my God gave it to me to have. My parents trained me to accept it. And now I have a responsibility to pass that power on. Now, here's the question. Are you doing work that has individual and community empowerment? Because community empowerment power is a different kind of power. What does that say? Your intervention should create what I call power and policy pendulum shifts. You really have to integrate into your research those opportunities that will shift an entire paradigm in a society. It's nothing wrong with doing research on how to have access to fruits and vegetables. But the question is, will it change the way people have access? Will you define opportunities about that access? Invest your time and resources in sustainable interventions. And here it is. Engage folks so they know who really has the power. Because the business community has power, but they don't have power without their customers. Understand that. Power to the people was never a pun. And it wasn't just for black folk. Power to the people meant that what you have in you is enough to change the world. Mentor new leaders, TCC. We need you. Mentor new researchers. We need you. And you've got to become a part of the movement, ladies and gentlemen, that changes the lives of communities of color and then impact. And I prayed about how I was going to talk about impact, and I got 5 minutes. I'm going to give it to you here. Your research has to be intentional, movement building, power and policy driven. It has to be accessible to everyone. It has to be conscious for communities of color, and it has to tell a story. Will your work today change the lives of people tomorrow? That's the question you have to ask yourself. Because if you don't know anything, your story actually matters. Research is nothing but storytelling. That's what research is. It is telling the story of a group of people, of a system. But beware. There's some well intentions out there that'll get you caught out there. Evidence-based research that is published, but it doesn't permeate systems. Beware of that. Beware of park and neighborhood watch programs. I'll give you examples, but they yield racial profiling. Beware. Fast food moratoriums, great. But what about the healthy options? How are you going to get there? Are you going to bring some jobs with you? That should be in your research. That should be a part of it. Competitive foods? Competitive foods bring revenue to schools. What's the replacement option? Researchers, give them solutions. Funding traps. And I'm going to put it out there. You want a 1-year grant for 400 years of this? Really? That 1 to 5 year RQ doesn't work that way. And don't get enslaved to the money, ladies and gentlemen. You'll be in bondage. You'll be in bondage. Paper partnerships. You gotta have real people to have partnerships. So what you wrote down on your proposal is nice, but if none of those folks are at the table, it is not a real partnership. And then your arrogance. Those of us that are in public health, we're arrogant. My mama was called a snotty stank nose. So what you mean? She said, you think because you went to school that you know anything? You think because we have a theory that we're connecting to people's souls and hearts? Your framework really gives you entree into this place? You're not that good. And until you get to the heart of the people, your arrogance will stand in the way of your progression. So what's the future? When all these things don't even matter. That's the vision for me for health equity. When none of these things matter. And this is my real vision for health equity. I don't want to bury that boy to a gun, to a police officer, because he just loves people and he's talkative. And I got to teach him to pipe down? That's not equity. I got to take him out of himself so I can save his life. This is equity. And 22 hours of labor say I'm responsible for that child. I want you to look at him and love him and care about him and want to see his future. I don't care what color you are, just save his life. I don't care what religion you are, just save his life. You are in a life-saving business, ladies and gentlemen. And here's my question for you. You got water? God bless you. Thank you so much.
All right, I can project. Now, who else is on fire? Hello everybody, good morning. My name is Jason Hopkins. I serve as the project director for the Transdisciplinary Collaborative Center for Health Disparities Research here at Morehouse School of Medicine. And we have a treat for you. So, in alignment with policies and practice, keyword practice, we must practice what we preach, correct? Yes. Okay. So we started at around what time? 9, 10, really late? That's fine. So you've been sitting down for over an hour, all right? Okay? So back at my alma mater, UCLA School of Public Health, we had an initiative called Instant Recess. And the rule was that after 1 hour of prolonged sitting, you had to get up and do some movement, okay? So, thank you, all right, yes. We got some exercise science majors in the house, we know, you know. You gotta disrupt that prolonged sitting. So, what we wanted to do for you is to open the stage for a manifestation of the policy and practice through movement. And we all know that culture drives so much of the work that we do here. So we have a cultural treat for you. I'm so pleased to announce our entertainment for this session. The group is named Giwayan Mata. They are based here in Atlanta, and they have a gift to share for you. Giwayan Mata.
Greetings to you all. Thank you. We are Giwayan Mata. We just performed for you Fanga, which comes to us through the late Dr. Pearl Primus, who was aggressive about bringing African culture to America. So this piece was a welcome piece that says welcome to you for being here and for doing all of the great work that you do. The next piece that we will do is called Sente. Sente comes to us from West Africa as well. It comes to us from the Bokeh region of Guinea, West Africa, and is performed by the Baga people. It was first performed on wooden drums called the kren, that was a log that had slits in it and played with sticks. And now, because of the popularity of the rhythm, it's played on the djembe, and these drums are of the djembe orchestra. And so this piece is done in celebration of rites of passage, and it's done to let young people know about the challenges that are coming as they move into adulthood. And so we know all about the challenges that we are facing today, and therefore we feel that this is appropriate. When we know our past, we can foresee our future and continue with caution, assertiveness, and success. Sente. So I bet you all are sitting out there thinking, wow, they look so great up there doing what they do. I want to get up there with them. Right? Am I thinking what you are thinking? Yes! Awesome. Well, this is an invitation for you to come up and dance with us. It is the intent of healthcare today for us to keep moving, right? For us to be active, to keep our adrenaline flowing, and keep all of our cells invigorated. And so we want to invite you to participate with us on our next piece, which is called Cuckoo. Everybody say Cuckoo? Yes, Cuckoo also comes to us from Guinea, West Africa. You know, we take what we have and make what we need. In Atlanta, a good 20 years ago, 30 years ago, there were a lot of individuals from Guinea who came to Atlanta and taught, who were Africans who came to Atlanta and taught. So a lot of the music that we are exposed to and that we do and love comes to us from Guinea, West Africa. So Cuckoo is a celebration dance. It started out as a celebration for the harvest of the fishermen when they would come back from fishing. Then, you know, everyone would be grateful for the harvest and would celebrate with this song. And so how many of us have harvests that we're grateful for? Yes, yes. And so it's important to, in being grateful, to acknowledge those harvests and to celebrate them. So we want to invite you to come on up. You can take your shoes off if you want. Don't be scared. The carpet is nice. And Kayla is going to do a, she'll show you how to do the dance movement, and then you will follow her. And You don't have to jump in.
Like, really, I'll help you. I will not leave you by yourself. I promise.
Yes.
Don't be scared.
Or you can stay where you are and just stand up and just rock with us for just a second. Okay? So if you want to come up, all right. If you want to stay where you are seated, or if you want to stand where you are, that's fine as well. 1 to 2 minutes.
So, for the people who are in your seats, we're going to get you ready to help. While they get ready, we're going to have you to help them with a chant. All right? Okay. So everybody out in the audience, I want you, when I say akukuaye, you say aye. Akukuaye? Aye. When I say akukuayo, you say ayo. Akukuayo? Ayo. When I say akukuaye amansaya, you say ku. Akukuaye amansaya? I'm going to say that one again. Akukuaye amansaya? Ku. Okay, so we're going to go to a rhythm, a beat like this. Akukuaye, akukuayo, ayo, akukuaye amansaya, ku. Akukuaye, aye, akukuayo, ayo, akukuaye amansaya, ku. Akukuaye, aye, akukuayo, ayo, akukuaye amansaya, ku. Okay, so you all remember that, because they're going to practice, they're going to get their dance moves down, and then we're going to come back and cheer them on, and I'm glad to see half the audience standing up right now. Awesome.
thank you all so much for your time and sharing your wonderful gift of culture with us today. Are you all feeling energized? Good. Let's keep up the momentum, shall we? All right, we're going to move right along in our program with our Shark Tank competition. All right, I'm going to talk really briefly. We're going to get right down to business, okay? Our Shark Tank competition, actually, I feel like I'm too far into the mic. Is this better? Better right here? Okay.
So our Shark Tank competition, we set up Shark Tank as a way of finding a different level of engagement with some of our community partners when it came to identifying ideal partnerships for our collaborative research. So this was something that we initiated
last year to great success, and we decided to give it a second time around. So the Shark Tank today is going to be focused on dissemination, okay? The first Shark Tank was on implementation, and now, in alignment with our TCC, we are focusing on disseminating the wonderful research that we've been doing over the past 4+ years. Okay? So a couple of ground rules here.
Our Shark Tank contestants will have 5 minutes to give their pitch. Once they hear the Jaws soundtrack, do we have our Jaws soundtrack? That is the end of your time. Keep it going, no, keep it going. And it's going to keep going. Because Jaws is coming. That means I'm Jaws, I'm coming for you. 5 minutes. Thank you. After 5 minutes of time, we will have 10 minutes of question and answer from the Shark Tank panel. If we have time, we will get one question from the audience. You should be receiving, if you haven't already, some index cards. That would be where you can place your questions. At this time, we will not have the mic open for questions. We'll have
during our policy forum later on this afternoon. Are we all good? All right. I would like to introduce our first contestant, Ms. Linda Ellis. So excited to get us started. I forgot to introduce our judges. All right, judges, go ahead and make your way to the stage. You see, I got ahead of myself there. You know, I'm still on fire by Miss Arlene Bradley's talk here. I need to slow it down. Thank you all so much for your time and patience. All right. I will introduce our illustrious sharp judges. First, we have Dr. Robina Josiah Willock. Next, we have Dr. Latrice Rollins here at Morehouse School of Medicine. And finally, we have Dr. Natalie Hernandez here at Morehouse School of Medicine.
So do I have a timer that starts? Now it starts. So I want to tell you a little bit about the Health Initiative. We are the statewide organization that supports the health of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender individuals. These are our project objectives. We want to conduct 6 multi-day cultural competency trainings around the state of Georgia. Our goal is to improve positive health outcomes for LGBT Georgians, and then to develop a stronger system of data collection related to electronic medical records. I want to tell you a little bit, you can look at this slide, but I want to tell you a little bit where we stand right now as a community. There have been great progress that we've enjoyed over the last several years as LGBT folks addressing our health issues. We have taken some significant steps back in the last couple of months that I want to make sure that you know about. We know that in the last couple of months, Any references to sexual orientation and gender identity has now been removed from the 2020 census. We know that we are taking a step back in that right now, they are in the process of removing any questions related to sexual orientation and gender identity in the surveys related to the Older Americans Act and support for older LGBT individuals. We know that in the last little bit, we have taken a significant step back as a community in that the White House has now removed the Rule 1557 that guaranteed some level of transgender supportive care in the Affordable Care Act. It's now gone. We're sitting here today wondering what step back we're going to take with the current vote on the Affordable Care Act right now. But we also know that as a community, we're waiting on the president right now to sign a religious freedom executive order that's going to take more steps back for LGBT folks. What we have, though, right now is that federally qualified healthcare centers are still required to ask questions of sexual orientation and gender identity in their electronic health records. That still stands. And FQHCs around the state are now having to ask those questions and don't know how to ask those questions. But that's what we're hooking this on. The questions of sexual orientation and gender identity in electronic health records is giving us a place to engage with FQHCs around the state and encourage them and support them to provide supportive care for LGBT folks. Let me tell you a little bit about LGBT. We're talking about lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender individuals. What we know is that we are an incredibly diverse community of individuals. We know that across the board, we tend to have lower levels of income than our straight peers in comparable situations or educational settings. We know that we are more likely to be un- or underinsured, especially for transgender individuals in our community. And we know that we are less likely to access health care because we're afraid to go. So this is where the health initiative comes in. What we are doing these days in Atlanta and across the state are making those connections, making those referrals, helping individuals in the LGBT community acquire health care coverage where they can. And if they are underinsured, we're connecting them to these federally qualified healthcare centers around the state, many of which right now aren't prepared for us when we get there. So that's where we're heading. We've got a collaborative effort going. We've got a steering committee that is made up of multiple representatives from Morehouse. We've got statewide provider groups that are in these conversations and are trying to figure out how to get this work done as every other step around us is getting taken back from us. So we're trying to work together to pull this together so that we can get out to these cities around the state and talk to folks in these federally qualified healthcare settings, help them, help us, help LGBT individuals access care. That's what we got. Thank you very much. You got some questions?
All right, Shark Tank.
Go easy, please. I'm first.
Can't do that, can't do that. Tell us a little bit about your background and your experience for leading this project that you're
My background specifically?
Your experience that qualifies you to lead this project.
Okay. So I am the executive director of the Health Initiative. My background personally is marriage and family therapy and theology. I've been leading the Health Initiative for 20 years, 15 years. And our organization started working specifically with lesbians who had been diagnosed with cancer here in the Atlanta area. As the community shifted, as the needs of the community grew, and as awareness grew, we have expanded our reach so that now we are an organization that operates throughout the state, based here in Atlanta. And we've got a strong team of folks on staff and in partnership that are helping us carry out this work.
Hi.
Hi.
So you mentioned this team that you have, and you know, and I don't know if Dr. Hopkins mentioned, but they had to submit concept papers, and we were able to read these concept papers ahead of time. And you're proposing to do cultural competency trainings to providers about LGBTQ populations, healthcare needs, and just how to provide, you know, culturally, you know, appropriate care to them.
Correct.
And in the concept paper, it wasn't clear how all these stakeholders were involved in this engagement process of delivering this intervention or disseminating this information to providers. Can you explain that a little bit on how these other key stakeholders, because I read, you know, about, you know, what your collaborative, you mentioned the collaborative and stuff, but how were they all engaged in this process?
So the collaborative is a larger effort, and what we're looking for funding here is one part of that. The collaborative started as we as a relatively small organization are trying to figure out how to reach across the state. We do that most effectively by providing information and referrals to folks that are already doing the care, rather than trying to raise the funding to build the bricks and mortar and provide the care ourselves. So we have enlisted through a series of surveys that we've put out in the community, through referrals that we're already making, and partners out in the community. We brought together as a team, as a strategic planning committee, as an advisory board for this collaborative. We've got on that team healthcare systems that are already doing some level of this work across the state. We've got representatives from public health departments across the state that are trying to figure out how to do this work. Several members of this team are federally qualified healthcare centers who are coming to us because we have referred LGBT individuals to them in the past and they didn't know what to do. And so they are increasingly aware of their need to be engaged in this process. The fact that their higher-ups, the fact that they are now federally qualified to report out on this information of sexual orientation and gender identity in electronic health records is pushing them to be at the table even more.
Thank you for your presentation. Let's talk a little bit about the content of your trainings. Is this something, what you're proposing to present, is this something that you've newly developed in terms of the content for this training and the curriculum? Is it something that's already existing, that you're testing its efficacy in this group? And also, why face-to-face trainings, given the kind of penetration that we need to have this really work? Why face-to-face and not using some of the more technologically?
Right. So we've tried that. We've tried, and I believe that it's both and. There are national groups that are already funded to do web-based trainings. We have, in partnership with TCC, actually offered some web-based trainings. And we get a couple of folks in those settings that will attend these things. And we have no way of engaging with them afterwards. So what we've learned about face-to-face trainings as it relates to these sorts of issues are a couple of things, is that what we want to establish with these providers is an to implement these policies, as they begin to ask these questions, when they run into issues, they know who they can call to say, okay, we messed up, help us figure this one out. Or we're running into a question, help us deal with that. That's the best role for us in providing this care. It also gives us face-to-face folks that we can make referrals to. So when we're talking to a transgender individual in a rural part of the state who is scared to death about making this step of actually going and seeking health care, we can hopefully refer them to an individual or a clinic that we know. One more reason about these face-to-face is that we're talking about questions of sexual orientation and gender identity. So the clinic can make the policy to be open and supportive of LGBT individuals. And typically, it's the social workers, it's the medical staff, the folks who need the CMEs and the CEUs who get to come to things like this and sit through these sorts of trainings or do that web-based. With questions of sexual orientation and gender identity, it's the frontline staff. It's the person who is least trained, least supported, least paid, and has the shortest tenure who's going to be asking these questions initially. And the system, as it is set up for them to fail. They don't know how to ask these questions. They're filled with their own questions about this community of folks, and they need a place to be able to safely practice, get uncomfortable, and work through it to something else before they can go out. And we've learned that face-to-face trainings do that. We've been doing this for 15 years. What we're doing now that's different is that we're focusing specifically on intake staff and working specifically with what are your questions related to sexual orientation and gender identity? How are they keyed into your electronic health records? And how can we help you ask those questions specifically?
So you're saying that your curriculum has been tested before?
Yes.
So as a conservative policymaker in Georgia, why should I care about this project or what you're aiming to do?
You probably won't. I mean, my reality is that you probably won't. Right now, the federally qualified healthcare centers are required to ask these questions. Whether or not they care, they are required to ask these questions. What we're learning from them is that it's freaking their staffs out. They don't know how to ask these questions. And they're dealing with their own assumptions and their own prejudices and their own questions. And all of that's happening internally. So you may not care, but for right now at least, we've got an opportunity that you're required to do this. So let us help you do that in the best way possible.
And we are out of time. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I'd like to answer it later. Who was that? Yes.
Oh, actually,
Who has a question? Yes, ma'am.
I've been working in the lesbian community for a long time, but one of the major problems was that they never had GYN checks. Has that changed? And if it has, with you, how can you make that possible? Because some of them will never go for GYN exam.
So one of the health issues that we have in the LGBT community is around those more intimate annual exams, breast and cervical exams. So part of the work of the health initiative, not related to this project specifically, is that we try to get as many messages out to the community about the importance and the responsibility of, if you have a particular body part, you need to get it checked. So even if you're not into pink ribbons, like Susan G. Komen and breast cancer stuff, we try to talk to the community about the fact that if you've got breast tissue, it is your responsibility to get it checked for the people that are in your life around you. And then the other thing that we do is that we work with clinics to set up more supportive ways for folks to feel comfortable coming. So we partner with local clinics. We take mammogram buses out and set up days so that LGBT folks who need those checks can feel comfortable with their peers around them, as opposed to going to some new and strange place to do that. And one of the good things about Susan G. Komen, with all of the pink ribbons, is that Susan G. Komen is working with us to recognize and train their folks that they need to make sure that people with breast tissue, not just women, are getting checked. So a lot of our screening days are geared towards transgender men who still have breast tissue and need to get it checked, or transgender women who, because of hormones, now have breast tissue and need to get it checked. So a lot of our piece is educating the providers in those communities, but you're exactly right. The other side of what we have to do is educate the community to get comfortable going. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Our next contestant is Ms. Danielle Brooks.
right, good morning. I want to first begin this conversation by thanking Megan Douglas and Dr. Mack, the co-investigators, and thank you for inviting me to talk about the PEDAL framework. So, I'm going to start off this conversation with a very cliched sentence. In 2017, we have really changed the healthcare industry by focusing away from service into an industry that's more focused on quality, quantity, patient engagement. Now, with that focus, it's crazy to me that we often do not talk about the elephant in the room, which are health inequities. And so from that, I want to enter the LHS system. The Learning Health System is a system that is designated to generate and apply the best evidence for collaborative healthcare choices. So that means we take science, informatics, care culture to create continuous improvements, best practices, and new knowledge. So to give you an anecdotal look at this, let's say you are a 30-something female African American that likes to dress like her presentations and you have allergies. So you go into your provider and they're able to enter this information into the system and provide the best type of care for you for your particular state. And that's awesome. And this theory has gained a lot of traction and endorsements of over 100 providers, really the whole of the industry. So I want to ask you guys to really think about that. So think about the power of this endorsement and think about what would happen if we put a health and equity lens or framework over this LHS system. So we enter the PEDAL framework. What the PEDAL framework is really a foundational framework that takes the power of the LHS system and looks at how we can tackle health inequities. So we do this through a component of 5 specific steps. We look at prioritizing health equity, engaging the community, targeting health disparities, acting on the data, and learning and improving. We do this by also having sustainability, technology, and social determinants of health really permeate and run across this framework. Again, this framework goes over the LHS system and provides a way to tackle health inequities. So why am I here giving you all this information? Well, we're looking for help for disseminating this framework. What we're looking to do is involve providers, patients, families, and caregivers, payers, healthcare organizations, patient groups, and social service and community organizations in this region to introduce them to this framework and have them use this to help battle inequities in their community. So we're going to do this in the digital and in the physical. We would like to use this support to build a website to house resources, develop a social media campaign where we engage people, but also have workgroup sessions and an ambassador training program so that we can engage stakeholders in person. In doing so, our goal is to, again, start with a workgroup session where we get the stakeholders in a room, introduce them to the PEDAL framework, and really work with them to understand how it could assist their communities. From there, we would like to, and we look to, develop an ambassador training program of about 25 to 30 individuals representing those stakeholders to take this information back into their organizations and really use it to effectuate change and reduce health inequities. And we're looking for a minimum 1-year commitment. In doing so, our goal is to develop resources and also an implementation resource so that these resources will live online, but it will serve as a foundation for these individuals to go back into their community and really support and deal with health inequities. But we're also going to use it to feed back and change and improve our framework. This is just a beginning for our project. We're looking at this opportunity as a catalyst to help us. And I want to leave it with some words from one of our participants, and I'm not sure how to play this with this clicker. Oops, that didn't work. Well, it was a video from one of our co-investigators stating the importance of involving communities in fighting.
We have got to learn that when we talk to patients, they are coming to us with different backgrounds, different insights, different biases that they may have that may be true, may be not true, but you have to acknowledge that. You have to understand that. It's going to drive what they're going to talk to you about, what they're not going to talk to you about, how you're going to manage their care. And if you don't understand that, our outcomes are not going to be. And then once you've identified it, do something about it. Don't keep talking about it, do something about it. Because you can. You can. You have got.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much for the presentation. So, you know, reading it, it sounds fantastic. Can you just walk me through it? Like, how will this work in real time? Because we talk about, you know, this framework, but translate that into practice. How, as a physician, am I going to work through this PEDAL framework?
Sure. So we look at it as really a building block to work with communities. The beauty of this framework, it's really valuable. So it could work for the smallest provider up to the payer. But in your example, we would work with the provider and we would start with prioritization. We would work with them to understand what are some of the issues in their specific area and their specific practice. And how can we prioritize looking at that? So maybe in the space of diabetes, their patients are not having access to healthy food. So we look at that and we ask them and we work with them hand in hand to understand how we can maybe hook them up with better healthcare, better food services, or better nutritional guidelines. And then we work with them to also show them how to engage that person to change their eating habits. And so it's really a step-by-step way of working with that specific community. And again, it can be up to the insurer down to the provider to assist them in tackling those specific inequities that affect their practice and the outcomes for their patients.
Have you done sort of like a pilot of this, and have providers talk about any barriers to implementing something? Because I know that they're short with time, and you know there's so many diverse needs of patients. So how would you prioritize a specific issue and then work on that with all of your patients?
Sure. So not per se a pilot, but we have used case studies that we have based this framework off of. So the Dr. Neelam Agarwal, who you spoke on this, she used the PEDAL framework in attacking stroke in the South Side and West Side of Chicago. And so, you know, in terms of showing a real-world example of how it worked, that is a really great example. And it was so simple as in talking to the healthcare systems in the area, developing a framework, and showing them how to attack stroke and really work with the stroke communities. And they have a marketable lessening of stroke incidences. And so, in addition to that, I would say the Learning Health System is a very valuable system. I had an opportunity to be a part of their summit in 2016 where the endorsements came from. And a lot of the people in those rooms, again, the providers, the payer, are very hungry for a way to tackle these health inequities and are very excited for an opportunity like something like this to provide knowledge into their system. So that's a really big way of saying, yes, it works in terms of we've seen this in our projects that we profiled, but also there's like a lot of excitement with this system and the endorsing partners, and that's why we're excited about it.
Thank you.
My question is similar to Dr. Hernandez in terms of outcomes based off of the two settings where you have implemented this framework. What are considered the indicators of success, and you know, how do you know that someone has successfully implemented this framework?
Sure. So a really great thing about this framework is the technology piece. I think we're really excited about that. That's a great way to kind of capture the data, capture the outcomes, and seeing where the effectiveness is lying. I'll go back to the stroke example because it's one of my more favorite examples. I'm from the Midwest, so I'm partial to that region. No disrespect to the South at all. But in that space, they use data and heat maps. So when they were able to measure from their outreach to the community and the outreach to their partners, and they were able to measure from a year-to-year basis to see the training and the effect of how many people got stroke treatment when they needed it. So what they're really concentrating on is making sure that people were receiving the right stroke care at the right time to make sure that the impact of stroke lessened. So less disabilities, less long-term problems. And they were able to show the improvements, but also their gaps. So when, you know, if something wasn't working and outreach wasn't working, they're able to come back and use data to reform it. So that's why technology lies underneath a lot of what we're doing. But we're also talking to community members, and I don't want that piece to not be recognized. A big part of what we want to engage with our participants and our stakeholders is you have to know your community, you have to talk to your community. So they are having people come back in the feedback loop saying, wow, this really helped me. I was able to talk to my church about this, and I noticed people got better care. So there's real life examples in the data.
We'll take one brief question from the audience. Does anyone have a question?
Actually, could you just put the slide back up that shows what the learning health system is? It was like those 3 circles that kind of connected to each other.
Yeah, sure.
He can do that. I'm clickerless.
This one?
The other one. Yep, one more. Okay, now just click through it. Oh, the other one. Click through it and the.
Yeah, that one. Okay, thank you.
And then keep clicking. You got 3 more clicks. Yep, done. So this is the input of information, and usually from technology and data. No worries. And they're really looking at improving continuous improvements, best practice, and new knowledge. So I put up that kind of geeky Star Trek picture because I think it's called a tricorder, and I'm not going to get into why I know that. But the idea is they were able to scan and understand what was going on by way of health. So in the future, that's the goal. When you have specific population clusters, or you have specific, or maybe a rare disease that only affects a percentage of people, the idea is to have that knowledge at hand so people can get the best treatment available at the right time.
Thank you. Your time is up.
Can I just add to one of the afternoon sessions at 2 o'clock? We're going to be talking a lot more about this framework and implementation of that. So any feedback or advice on some of that, we'll look back at that.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brooks. Our next contestant is Dr. Sukwon Jin.
Good morning. Good morning again. I'm Sukwon Jin. I'm Sukwon Jin, assistant professor at Clark Atlanta University. Sorry for my voice. I lost my voice just landed from Mississippi today morning. So I provided 2 presentations yesterday all day long. So sorry about my lost voice. Okay. Also, I'm a grantee of the previous 2014-15 TCC pilot project program. So the previous pilot project investigated the factors associated with decisional stage of adoption for colon cancer and breast cancer among Korean Americans. This study found the knowledge, self-efficacy, and attitude beliefs are closely associated with the breast cancer adoption among Korean Americans. Today's proposed study builds on the previous the TCC pilot project. So the proposed project aims to examine the effect of a 4-week-long social media-based health information delivery designed to improve knowledge, self-efficacy, and attitude belief pertaining to mammography. In order to increase mammography among Korean American aged 45 to 54 who are not adherent to annual mammograms. Why mammography? Previous studies show that about half of the Korean American women met the recommended breast cancer screening guidelines, which is significantly lower than the rates of U.S. general population and the national target specified by Healthy People 2020.
Why social media? These are popular social media logos.
I chose social media as a medium to deliver the mammography-related information to target audience because social media was optimal to effectively deliver the health-related information, especially the visualized information, including video clips, pictures, to the target audience, especially hard-to-reach population who usually lack adequate, timely, the health information. And I chose social media because social media allows the creative social media community members to communicate with each
other, sharing their thoughts, changing their ideas on the information they receive. I chose social media because social media sustain this community to be together and support each other, even the completion of the project. TCC is using a variety of social media to
disseminate information and inform policy. President Trump is using Twitter, which sometimes making big trouble though, you know. Okay, so how I can conduct this study?
This study will recruit a total of 220 Korean American women ages
45 to 54 living in the Atlanta metropolitan area who are not adherent to breast cancer screening guidelines, leveraging the partnerships with community organization established through my previous TCC pilot project, and using the advertisement of ethnic radio station, newspapers, and social media, and utilizing contact information obtained
from my previous study project for future interventions. So,
mammography related health information will be created based on existing the materials such as breast cancer toolkits and cancer screening guidelines. This information will be delivered via either mailing or social media. So 200, so considering 10% attrition, 200 participants will be randomly assigned in either group control group. That's it. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Judges.
Thank you for your presentation. As you presented, you talked a lot about recruitment. You talked about comparing social media versus mail delivery. Can you help us understand just a little bit more clearly what makes this dissemination and a dissemination effort as opposed to a research project, kind of maybe testing the effectiveness of two different methods of delivering an intervention?
Yeah, okay, thank you for asking the question. I think the conventional approach is the
mailing or the CD drives. We have been using those things, but we understand that as social media has grown rapidly across all ethnic groups, that would be a great tool to deliver information, disseminate especially health information to the hard-to-reach population. But we have not tested yet the effectiveness or the feasibility of this delivery. So without the evidence of the effectiveness of this delivery, we cannot say we can use this the social media delivery system to increase something, change our behavior. So this is very basic, essential, the test for the looking for evidence. So how can you say the fake news change our president without any evidence for the effect of fake news on the voting behavior? So, did I answer the question?
Just to tag on to her question, it seems as if the process is twofold. You have to kind of evaluate the material as well as the method. So how are you teasing out whether or not people just, are not persuaded or motivated by the material that you send as opposed to the method?
It is hard to answer the question because the limited time, the time limitation and budget limitation, I cannot add additional the arm of the test. So now I just looking for the effectiveness of the social media approach compared to the conventional one.
But I think two faculty members from Georgia State University from Department of English Literature Education and Language Applied Science, I have the established partnership with them to develop my survey for the pilot project. So I think that developing the information for mammography, so they will join to help me how to translate, how to tailor the information according to culture, according to stage of the people's information adoption.
So I had similar questions, but then you mentioned, your partners. What other, and then in your concept paper, you mentioned the community, and I didn't see it throughout. So how were the community members engaged through this whole process in creating, your methodology to materials? Like, just tell me a little bit of the engagement of the community, because you mentioned them as a partner, but I'm not clear as to where they come in and how they are, through the whole process.
Yeah, thank you asking, because of the limitation of the page for concept paper, I could not write down all detailed information about that.
Yes, American Asian Resource Center is my partner for the community research project. They will help me to recruit the participants, especially for Korean American women. Also churches and pastors, we collaborated on data collection before, so we are on the same page to move forward to next intervention study. So they're willing to help me. So I think the nonprofit organizations and churches is the major recruitment tool for this project.
I think, you have a lot of opportunities with including the community, not just with recruitment, but, Dr. Rollins mentioned the materials and helping to create culturally sensitive materials and that are applicable to the population, and especially in how they use social media, because people assume that older populations don't use it, but they do. Mm-hmm. But then how are we creating messages that resonate with this specific community? And then not only that, but then that age group, and then with women in particular, so I think that you should grab that and include that in further proposals on this whole process of community engagement. So not just to help recruit, but actively be involved from planning through implementation and dissemination.
Including the interpretation of the findings.
Yes.
Yes, I like the comments on that because
according to statistics, Korean smartphone users, more than 90% of Korean smartphone users are actively use at least one social media. So they talk. So I communicate with my parents living in South Korea via smartphone and any application. Yes, cheaper, no money, restricted.
All right, the time is up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next contestant. Our next contestant is Daniel Griffin, being presented by Mr. Torian Baskerville, Thrive SS Incorporated.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. So my name is Torian Baskerville. I am the HIV Policy Fellow with Georgia Equality as well as Thrive SS, and so I'm going to be presenting our pitch to you guys. So Thrive SS stands for Transforming HIV Resentment into Victories Everlasting Social Services. Support services, excuse me. And essentially what the organization is created to do is change the social norms around HIV among Black, same-gender, gay, and bisexual men living with HIV. And so how we do that is we serve the purpose of providing support through lessening gaps of disparities, advocacy through mobilizing people living with HIV, and improving health equity for people living with HIV. So some ways that we have done this is we have what we call a seroversary. And so a seroversary is us celebrating that day that individuals learned of their seroconversion, of the HIV seroconversion. And so instead of that day being thought of as a negative, what we do is celebrate that day. Because on that day, it's about you learning the information and then getting into care and really moving towards virus suppression, because we know that virus suppression, once that is reached, it pretty much eliminates transmission to other people, which limits the spread of infections in the community. And so another way we do it is through I Thrive, I Survive, which is an event that we do to kind of celebrate individuals living with HIV, specifically Black, same-gender loving, bisexual, or gay men living with HIV. We know that in the South specifically, of the 21 metropolitan statistical areas, 21 of the 25 are in the Deep South. CDC is reporting last year that projected in 2020, 1 in 2 Black gay men living with HIV will be living with HIV in their lifetime. So we're just trying to change that norm and change those numbers through changing social norms. So that brings us to the Shark Tank pitch. So what we're doing is creating an HIV providers report card. It's going to be created for Black, gay, bisexual, same-gender loving men living with HIV. And it's really about culturally connecting care, wait times, providers' comfortability, providing care to Black, gay, bisexual, same-gender loving men, as well as information provided will form a 2017 Thrive policy agenda released on World AIDS Day for 2017. So what we'll do is through a social app, we will create surveys that people living with HIV can report on their interactions with HIV providers. Taking that information and that data to then create a policy agenda as well as an HIV providers report card where we're then able to go to organizations and kind of give information on how we can improve the services for people living with HIV. Innovation. So the key population, again, is Black MSN living with HIV in the Deep South. We'll use a mobile application using iOS, Android software, and a new market for uptake and adaptability. And just, again, we live in the world of technology. Technology is always changing, and so being able to use social media and things like that to reach the population. We actually, on Instagram today, we released or starting a new dissemination program if you're on Instagram, Thrive_SS, and what we're doing is a social media campaign where we have individuals living with HIV just sending out positive messages through pictures to populations. So that's my presentation.
So you mentioned creating this policy agenda. What happens with the policy agenda once it's created? How are you going to be using that to inform policy?
So as the HIV policy fellow, this past legislative session in Georgia, it was my job to essentially go to the Capitol and be kind of the liaison between Black gay men living with HIV and the policymakers to kind of inform them on some of the difficulties that we've been having as a community. And so with this policy agenda, through these surveys, what then will happen is next legislative session, we will again use that data and that information kind of inform policymakers on what things are happening in the community for Black gay men living with HIV and how we can work together to kind of lessen some of those issues to optimize health outcomes for people living with HIV.
So when I think about a dissemination or an app that's being used for dissemination, part of what I'm also looking to hear is a bit about what are some of the things your group has found, evidence-based findings, information that you're pushing out to your participants, so your community. So first I'd like to know, is this a closed community in terms of those who would be using the app? And also, is it simply just collecting information in, or are there specific plans to disseminate information to the participants as well?
So yes to both of the questions. The first question is, how do we disseminate? It is a closed population. We have a group called Undetectables Atlanta, which is a part of the Thrive SS umbrella, so to speak. And that network has about 650 individuals living throughout the state of Georgia. So this will be utilized and sent through them initially. And then again, this has the potential to expand beyond that closed network. And then to the other question, how will we also be disseminating information to participants? So we have it currently, the way that we do it is we have a Facebook group that we currently disseminate information out. And so we do that through, for instance, as changes happen policy-wise, we disseminate that information to them. When, about HIV criminalization laws and things like that. We also do hold forums and things like that where individuals can come and kind of get informed about things that affect them related to HIV and living with HIV. And so we still will be able to use the app to kind of disseminate that information to individuals. But yeah, so those are ways that we currently do it in order to ensure that participants are engaged with receiving as well as giving information. Does that answer your question?
It does.
Okay.
I'd like to take a question from the audience, if there is one. If so, just raise your hand.
I had a question. Can you talk about the unique contributions of this data and how it will inform the policy agenda? Because there's been studies already that talk about, these men's experience in provider offices and wait times and things like that. So is your goal to have a specific agenda tailored to this region or to this state, or why is it that you feel the need to collect additional data when there's kind of previous studies that have been done?
So yes, this data would be used specifically to Atlanta and the Deep South because we recognize that HIV disproportionately affects Black, same-gender loving, bisexual, gay men living with in the communities, and so we also understand that getting them linked into care and virus suppression and retained into care also unfortunately is not where it should be. And so we're just trying to minimize some of the barriers that are happening that's causing them to not get into care and be retained into care. And so this information will really be used to get more information about how do we minimize those barriers to get people into care and virally suppressed. And I think that that's important because I don't think that there has been information in that way that has been used that creates an agenda that is specifically for Black gay men living with HIV, from Black gay men living with HIV, from their perspective, and then giving out and disseminating and speaking on their behalf. And so I think that's what makes it unique and innovative from that standpoint.
We have our last question in the audience.
I didn't hear how are you going to take the information out? How are you going to gather the information?
I'm sorry?
The process of gathering the information.
So it will be used through an app, and so a mobile app that can be downloaded on a phone. We currently have the app created. However, some of the proceeds or the money from this project will be able to actually make that come into fruition. We actually have the person who developed it just kind of waiting standby, to kind of make this happen. And so that money will be used to kind of create that, but it will be collected through a mobile app.
And it's exclusively for your, MSM?
Yeah, so it will be exclusive for, at least for currently, it will be utilized specifically for Black, same-gender loving, bisexuals, and gay men living with HIV, yes. All right.
The time, thank you. Can we all give a round of applause to all of our Shark Tank contestants as well as our judges? Thank you so much for your time. And that concludes our Shark Tank presentation. Next we have Dr. Divine Ofedu.
Thank you. Our next guest speaker is Mr. Matthew Wesley Williams. Mr. Williams is the Vice President of Strategic Initiatives for the Forum for Theological Exploration, a national leadership incubator that cultivates wise, faithful, and encourages leaders who make a difference in the world through the church and academy. Prior to joining FTE, he served as a program coordinator for the National Black Leadership Initiative on Cancer here at Morehouse School of Medicine. He holds a Master of Divinity degree from the Interdenominational Division from Florida A&M University. He is an ordained ruling elder in the Presbyterian Church. Mr. Williams is also a trained facilitator with both the Global Center for Courage and Renewal and the Art of Housing Communities. A thriving cancer survivor and fierce advocate for holistic health and wellness, Mr. Williams enters his story after being diagnosed with stage 4 adenoid cystic carcinoma in July 2014. In his talk, he will explore some of the ethical, historical, and systemic issues related to health equity derived from his learning journey towards becoming a thriving survivor. At this time, we welcome Mr. Matthew Williams to the stage.
Good morning. I want to extend a deep bow of honor to Dr. Montgomery Rice and Dr. Satcher, a deep word of gratitude to the Morehouse Center for Transdisciplinary Collaborative, for the Morehouse Transdisciplinary Collaborative Center, to Dr. Holden, Dr. Hopkins, Dr. Devine, for this invitation to share my story as a reflective resource for our consideration of how we might leverage research to advance policy, offer some reflections and questions drawn from my learning during this journey, and explore the ways in which my story may be and may not be helpful in considering how we may advance health equity, especially considering the soil upon which we sit here in the Southeast, which constitutes the regional focus area for the TCC. About 2.5 years ago, just after my 38th birthday, I was diagnosed with stage 4 adenoid cystic carcinoma, a rare form of salivary gland cancer. Since that diagnosis, I've been on an extraordinary journey of learning and discovery toward healing and wellness. And I'm grateful to say that I stand before you today in good health. 2 years from treatment, great results from my most recent test, and living in a daily practice of wellness and healing. I'm doing well. And I thank my God, my ancestors, my family, and my community for the strength, the guidance, and the support I've needed to walk this path. So I want to invite you to take a walk with me down memory lane. A few weeks before my 38th birthday, during a routine visit to the dentist in early July of 2014, I mentioned that I had this small lump on the roof of my mouth that just wouldn't go away. And looking at it, the dentist said, well, you ought to have an oral surgeon look at that. So a week later, the oral surgeon took a look at it and said with confidence, well, it looks like you have a benign cyst in a minor salivary gland. These things go away and these things happen, but this one might need to come out. So when I pressed a little bit further, he said, I asked him, do you think it's malignant? He said, nah, malignant tumors don't look like that. You'll be fine. And strangely, his quick confidence slightly unsettled me. I thought, how can he be so sure just by looking? I've never known medical professionals to speak so dismissively without investigating things first. Well, we scheduled the surgery and then we got the lump out. Then a few weeks later came the follow-up appointment and those fateful words back from the lab. It's malignant. Dumbfounded as I was. And I can feel right now how I felt in that moment with my gut roiling. I believe groans were probably what God made to substitute for words to carry the feelings I felt in that moment. I went home in shock and in terror and looked outside and just stared at the trees in a daze. And I sat on my bed next to some information on adenocarcinoma that the surgeon had given me. Then the phone rang. It was the surgeon. It turns out I gave you the wrong information about the wrong disease. Let me give you the right name so you can look it up for yourself. The diagnosis is not adenocarcinoma, it's adenoid cystic carcinoma. So he says, please keep me posted as to what the next set of doctors say. Let me know how I can be helpful. And I thought, you've done enough. So now, in addition to my shock and terror, I was angry as angry could be. I was angry at the physician for bungling things. First, for projecting baseless confidence, and then for providing misinformation in a sensitive moment. And it only deepened my pre-existing mistrust, healthy mistrust, of what some call the medical establishment. And it planted a seed in my mind and in my heart. I can't rely on him to guide me. I have to find my own doctor and my own information. And looking back, what I realize is that this series of events early on was a gift to me that would shape the journey that was to unfold. So the next morning, I pop out of bed at about 5 a.m. I took my computer to another room and I began to channel my anxiety into research. And before long, I found a site for the International Support Organization for Adenoid Cystic Carcinoma. And one of the most helpful things I found on that site was a passage that described the practices and profiles of survivors. They offered a lot of good advice. Get second opinions, do your own research, get the support of your community. But these words jumped off the screen. Listen, it says, take charge and manage your own health. Survivors realize that they alone have the disease and they alone have the most influence on the outcome. Ask questions, be persistent in getting answers that make sense to you. Challenge the establishment. I took these words as law. With watery eyes and a quivering gut and shaky knees, I got up from that computer and I said to myself, by God, this is me. This is what I'm going to do. And I didn't know it then, but from that moment, I began the process of becoming a survivor, taking responsibility for my own health and well-being, slowly but surely letting go of the poisonous idea that they are responsible for helping me stay in a state of not sick. Now that walk down memory lane is just a glance at a few days following the diagnosis. And those days foreshadow a long journey that would unfold to include intense work with practitioners in traditional Chinese medicine, nutritional science, naturopathic medicine, and energy medicine, alongside conventional Western medical practitioners at Emory University and the University of Washington Medical Center. It included a 3-week stay and study leave at the Hippocrates Health Institute to learn and implement a program of personal health, diet, and nutrition. It included a 5-week round of radiation treatment at the University of Washington in Seattle. And it included a radical change in lifestyle anchored by a whole food, vegan, nutritional, and dietary regimen, exercise, stress mitigation, prayer, and meditation, among other practices. And it included an ongoing program of learning that continues to this day about the role of the power of the mind, body, spirit connection in individuals, communities, and broader society to generate health and healing, and the social, political, and economic forces that drive the proliferation of chronic disease and health inequity in the U.S. My experience has provided me a personal lens through which to view a public crisis. And for me, it's also been a crash course in the ways in which the interdependent industries that comprise what we call the healthcare system in the U.S. generates disparities in health indicators and outcomes according to the intersectional identifiers of race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, gender identity, sexuality, and citizenship status. Also, at a more basic level, it also often reflexively reproduces and reinforces personal and social practices that substitute unsickness for health. But my experience is also teaching me how to build a practice of health-rooted resistance to those dominant practices and patterns, and has exposed me to a movement of committed change makers who are forging transdisciplinary experiments in health equity locally, regionally, nationally, and internationally. So for the next few moments, I want to share with you a few reflections punctuated by questions that have emerged from me during this journey that have relevance, I believe, to this question of health equity. And I want to start these reflections with a question that may serve as a North Star that can guide our collective efforts to foster the highest level of health for all people. And that is, who and what do we value? I'm so grateful for Dr. Kamara Phyllis-Jones and the question she raised as a primary point in this question of health equity. Who and what do we value? To seek health equity, particularly in the Southeast, is to propose a corrective to the culture of black and brown exploitation that has characterized this region since its formation in the bowels of American slaveocracy. In this context, I believe black health is a proverbial tide by which all boats can rise. But any discussion of black health is predicated on and conditioned by how we imagine and confer value on black life. Black health can only matter if black lives matter. And I'm aware that my motivation and my ability to be my own advocate and act in my own best interest for my own health required me to determine whether I felt my life was worth saving. I had to love myself enough to beat back the voices that devalue the labor and the lives of black folk and anchor myself in the conviction that my life is worth it, that my life matters. Over the past few years, the cry of Black Lives Matter, as we've mourned Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown and the Charleston Nine and Freddie Gray and Sandra Bland and now here lately, Jordan Edwards and Laquan McDonald, among many others, this cry has served as the soundtrack to my journey back toward health and wellness. And when Opal Tometi and Alicia Garza and Patrice Cullors coined that hashtag, Black Lives Matter, they were echoing long honored voices like the 1968 Memphis sanitation workers. Remember, I Am a Man? Remember Sojourner Truth's prophetic inquiry, Ain't I a Woman? Black Lives Matter is a mild but a revolutionary declaration. And the turmoil it stimulates is but a small piece of evidence of the fact that while we seek to end health inequity and health disparities, we do so in a context in which the value of black life is a contested thing, especially in this political moment and in this region, where the legacies of enslavement and the commodification of black life and black bodies lurk around every building, barn, and bank. Taylor Johnson Gordon, who co-founded Black Lives Matter Philly and started Sister of the Yam in Philadelphia, says, if we are going to be concerned about black lives, we can't just be concerned about the quick death of black homicide and police killings, we also have to be concerned about the long and slow death of what she calls nutritional violence and the ways in which our people are dying from health effects that show up and crop up over a long period of time. So what and who do we value? How might we develop strategies for health equity that not only prioritize black health, but actively and explicitly cultivate in our people, our projects, and our policy making a deep inward sense that black communities are worthy of investment, that black health is attainable, and that black lives matter and are worthy of care? Who and what do we value? That's the first question. The second comes from my experience as a diagnosed person. And the diagnosis of a chronic or serious disease initiates you into a peculiar relationship with the interdependent industries that together comprise and contribute to what we call our healthcare system: medical, food, insurance, public health, and in my case, what some would even call the cancer industry. While we call these interdependent industries a healthcare system, I must admit, I've often found myself walking in and out of medical centers and hospitals and doctors' offices and pharmacies, and I wondered, what are our systems designed to do? Mind you, I'm not asking what are these systems intended to do. I'm asking what are they designed to do? In other words, how have their constitutive elements been arranged and coordinated such that they function in a particular way? Such that they do this and not that, such that they produce consistently over time a same and similar result. This is not a question of intent, it's a question of design. What are our systems designed to do? I'll never forget an aha moment I had while shopping in the grocery store. I was walking down the two healthy food aisles in the whole store. And then it occurred to me, if this is the healthy food aisle, what's the rest of this stuff? What are our systems designed to do? My friend Christopher Carter, who teaches theology, ethics, and ecological studies at the University of San Diego, tells the story of a call he received from his grandfather one day. His grandfather was a career farmer. Chris teaches about it, but his grandfather doesn't. And his grandfather was in the grocery store and called him and asked him, said, "Chris, what does this label organic mean on this produce?" Chris responded and told his grandfather about the practices farmers have to follow to have their produce certified organic. And his grandfather replied, "Oh, I get it. You mean normal. Normal farming. So why don't they just take the labels off the normal produce and put it on the produce that has all that extra stuff in it?" What are our systems designed to do? When I worked at the National Black Leadership Initiative on Cancer here at Morehouse, Dr. Terry Mason was on our board, and in the margins of a board meeting, he once told me, "Matt, we don't have a healthcare system in this country. We have a detection and treatment system." Healthcare, he noted, would empower people with information and resources with which they can actively care for themselves, and rather than being in a passive and dependent relationship with medical experts. Healthcare, he said, would be designed to tend actively to the cultivation of optimal health rather than waiting passively for disease to show up. And what Dr. Mason was lamenting was that the dominant health paradigm in this country is embodied in systems that are designed at best to manage infectious disease and treat illness, and at their worst can actually contribute to the very illnesses that they're designed to manage and treat. Dr. Elaine Ferguson notes that the medical education in this country has largely been shaped by business interests and focuses the training of future physicians on the identification and treatment of traumatic injuries and acute diseases. And studies on medical education reveal that physicians and medical professionals typically receive little to no health education, wellness training, and nutritional education. In fact, a survey of 127 accredited medical schools in the U.S. found that on average, nutrition was included in less than 1% of lecture content across 4 years of medical education. No wonder my doctors rarely asked me about what I was putting in my body. They confirm what Wendell Berry says. He says, people are fed by the food industry, which pays no attention to health, and then they're treated by the health industry, which pays no attention to food. So what are our systems designed to do? Well, to recognize that these systems are designed is to affirm that these systems are the results of choices. And it's also to affirm that different choices can be made to redesign current systems or to design alternatives that can produce the outcomes that we want to see. So who and what do we value? What are our systems designed to do? And thirdly, a question comes up in a conversation with a friend of mine about my dietary practices and my ongoing learning about health and healing. He asked me a question that I think has great significance for our work. He said, Matt, how do you see your body? How do you see your body? And I want to extend that question to this gathering. And how might that answer, our answer to that question, advance or inhibit our efforts toward health equity? I encountered at least two answers to this question in my work with doctors. On the one hand, I made treatment decisions with doctors at UW and at Emory who saw the body as a mechanical and a medical problem with parts that didn't speak to one another. So that if you want to have your heart dealt with, you go to floor 8. If you want to have your head dealt with, you go to floor 9. If you want to have your gut dealt with, you go to floor 4. And never do those conversations intersect with one another, right? But on the other hand, I encountered medical professionals in the so-called alternative space who didn't see health as synonymous with not sick. In that alternative space, counted the view of the human being as a whole and a complex living system. So that you can't touch one part of the body and not touch another part of the body. And that health is not just about the individual, but health is also about the community's health and the conditions in which people need to thrive. Health includes the body, it includes the mind, but it also includes the spirit and the cultivation of the life force that connects human beings to all other living beings, other humans, other plant life, animal life, and the living universe itself. So this is what Martin Luther King picks up on in his view when he declared, in a real sense, all of life is interrelated. All of us are caught up in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. So this paradigm offers us something different about how we might view our bodies, how we might view our communities. And so it's not difficult to notice that our understanding of health and equity is ultimately dependent on our understanding of what it means to be human. What do we value? What are our systems designed to do? And how do we see our bodies? And finally, I want to say a quick word about my personal practice and its implications for health equity. My personal practice is a spiritual practice and a political practice. And I've come to embrace an orchestra of disciplines that are required for my well-being as a form of recovering the bodily sovereignty that was denied my ancestors in the bloody soil of this Southeast. My practice is a way of honoring God's wisdom in creation and the ancestral shoulders upon which I stand. And it's also a practice for me as a Christian that follows in the way of Jesus, the revolutionary who beat back the forces of empire and oppressive religion that participated in what Ta-Nehisi Coates would call the plunder of the least, the last, and the left out. But I'm deeply aware that my personal practice or any personal practice is not enough to change the systems and bring about the world that we want to see. The radical change that health equity calls for requires work at a different level. One of the oldest misconceptions about social change is that if you accumulate enough transformed individuals, you'll eventually reach a critical mass or a tipping point at which a community will be transformed. But the truth is, if you want to transform a community or a system, you have to work at the systemic or the communal level, not at the individual level. In other words, you can't work at the level of the atom, you have to work at the level of the molecular bond, the quality and the nature of relatedness between atoms that make the molecule possible. And this is an area, relatedness, in which I believe health equity must work. This is the stuff of community transformation and systemic change. Shifting how we understand and form relationships between ecologies and individuals, disciplines, organizations, and communities in the system, from discovery to delivery, research to reform, seed to soil, field to market, healer to hurting, root to remedy, and farmer to family. So I'm curious about how we might reform the current system, but I'm more curious about how transdisciplinary efforts can build alternatives that cultivate health consciousness and health care, truly. I believe the seeds of the new and the alternative are already among us, and I've seen it for myself. But the new and the alternative can only emerge if we stand and act in what Parker Palmer calls a tragic gap. He calls it the tragic gap because it is the gap between where we want to be and where we are. And he calls it tragic because we who are fighting for something different often have experienced a glimpse of something that's possible. And we know it's not a pipe dream or a wishful thinking, but we know it's possible because we've experienced. So I've experienced and seen black churches connect with black farmers to create local alternative food systems that deliver affordable organic produce to poor families. I've seen communities of women recovering from domestic violence and other forms of abuse through sustainable agriculture, and the community learning how to grow food and prepare healthy food as part of a spiritual practice. I've seen agricultural organizers build a sustainable organic garden in a South African township, then teach the community how to sustain the garden and make the harvested organic food free to the community. I've seen physicians build thriving practices, integrating the best of Western medicine and ancient practices of treatment and healing. I've seen social entrepreneurs build capacity for wealth creation in poor urban communities. I've seen conscientious business owners shift their business models to meet the triple bottom line of financial, social. I've seen it, and I know the alternative is possible. I wonder what you've seen. I wonder what you've experienced. What has seeped into your cells and into your bones? I want to invite you to act and stand and act in that tragic gap in the interest of the world you know it can be. I'm grateful to be here, and again, I'm grateful to be invited to see a gathering of folks who have the capacity to stand and act, to build the kinds of projects, programs, and policies, and ultimately the world we all long to see. Thank you.
So much, Mr. Williams. Wow. I think it's time to take a breath, everybody. Deep breath in. And clear breath out. All right. Thank you all so much for joining us for our opening session of our TCC Health Policy Research Summit. We will now proceed to our breakout sessions. If you all have your booklets, you will see our breakout sessions delineated on pages 3 and 4 of the At a Glance. We have runners and escorts here to get you in the rooms of your respective breakout sessions. We encourage you all to join us for these dynamic breakout sessions and workshops. There's a lot of great information here. At this point in time, we're going to go ahead and close, and please proceed to the lobby auditorium area. Okay. It looks like the second session does not have a room. All right. If you are interested in that second session, we'll direct you where you need to go, okay? All right. I'll read it. So, the Strategic Partnership, a critical foundation for leadership training and advancing health equity, will be in NCPC 207-218, which is on the second